Hi, I'm Rob,
And I'm Mike.
and this is Let's Get Ethical.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Let's Get Ethical. Rob, how you doing today?
I'm excellent. Mike, how are things in sunny California?
A lot better than New Hampshire, I'll tell you that. 100%.
Yeah,
You see that sun coming through? That's
yeah.
real
Don't
sun.
don't
Yeah.
rub it in, man. It's been a long, cold winter, and we're just not even halfway through it yet. But that's
Oh
okay.
man. It's been a cold winter out here too. I think it hit like 65 today. It's like
Oh, I'm so sorry that it's 65. You can come
yeah,
here when it's 18.
I almost had to put on a long sleeve shirt. Almost. I almost had to put on pants instead of shorts. Yeah.
Again, so sorry for you.
Totally. So today, everybody, what we want to do is we want to continue our discussion on ethics, but we want to have a real interesting conversation, we think, on ethics. Rob, you were in the Navy, correct?
Yes, I was in the Navy.
How long did you serve?
Just about 14 years between active duty and reserve.
Yeah. Okay. And you were a corpsman, right?
I was a Navy hospital corpsman. That's correct.
And so for everybody, including myself, who did not serve, what does that mean?
So a Navy hospital corpsman is basically it's the equivalent of being a medic in the Army, except the Navy has a very long-standing tradition in the hospital corps. We are the only enlisted corps in the entire United States Navy. But so I was a medic essentially.
Nice. All right. And so that's interesting because what we want to talk about today is care of patients who have served, essentially. Now, have you had any experience with the VA?
So I have not really outside of, let me tell you my experience with the VA. So
Yes,
I have not actually had care in the VA. I've always just used private insurance through work. But one of my very first clinical rotations as an RT student was in the VA hospital here in Manchester. And so
really?
I did get to, as a veteran and as an RT student, I had the opportunity to care for some of our veterans within the veterans healthcare system.
Okay. The reason that I ask is because many veterans, after they've served, they need care, and we have to provide that care ethically, of course, which is let's get ethical. It's what it's all about. But many of them actually need caregivers in the home to help them. I know we're both aware of this, but it's something I don't think it's discussed enough. And it's funny because on my LinkedIn, of all the professions or professionals that I'm connected with, I see a lot of good things about the VA. But then I have friends who are vets who have caregivers and friends who are caregivers, and they tell me a different side. And it's quite interesting to me to see that contrast, the real life experience versus what I'm seeing on LinkedIn with the people that I'm connected with. And it prompted us to do this episode and get some statistics for starters. Did you know 14.3 million military and veteran caregivers exist in the United States?
Wow. That's almost an imaginable number. That's huge number.
That is a huge number. That's a bunch of people that need care. And the way that I understand it, and we're going to bring a guest on in just a minute, who is a caregiver. And the way it's explained to me is that the caregiver is essentially unpaid labor. Unpaid labor, family member, a close relative, or a friend who in some cases has no idea about how to navigate healthcare initially, about what goes on in the medical community, who is now responsible for helping this person, this vet, navigate the issues that they face upon discharge.
Yeah, and there's some significant issues, right? There's significant barriers to have to overcome in order to get anybody, right, discharged. But think about our military veterans that have served, that have PTSD and combat wounds and et cetera, and how do we transition them from the VA, or, they don't want to go to long-term care, for example. They want to live in a home. They want to reintegrate into society. And I think this is a really great conversation, Mike, and I'm glad we're having it today, because I think, to your point, there's much like we talk about in Let's Get Ethical, this is an area of ethics and morality, et cetera, that isn't really brought up enough. And I'm excited that we're going to have this conversation today.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and bring them on. There's a bunch of other statistics I'm sure we'll get to. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce everybody, first of all, to my friend, GR Zuniga, who is a caregiver. But GR is more than a caregiver. GR is the COO of Operation Sick Care, and I'm sure he's going to tell you a little bit about what Operation Sick Care does, and we're going to give you links to all this stuff so that you can get involved and help. He's also a 2025 Elizabeth Dole Foundation Fellow. He's a caregiver, a family caregiver to his brother, Doc Ziggy Zuniga. And Ziggy served in the United States Army as an infantry medic with the 101st Airborne. And he served during the global war on terrorism. And the whole purpose of Operation Sick Care, GR's goal, is to strengthen the veteran care ecosystem. That's what he wants to do. He wants to build effective support systems for veterans and for veterans' families and the caregivers that they have to deal with. So let's go ahead and bring him on. GR, thank you so much for coming on today. I know I appreciate it. I know Rob appreciates it. And I think this is going to be awesome.
Rob, Mike, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to come on and have this conversation with you guys.
Thanks, GR. Welcome.
Yeah. So just for context, so that everybody knows, I have known GR for 33 years.
A long time.
Yeah. And I've known Ziggy for 33 years as well.
That's a long time.
Yeah. And so when he started Operation Sick Care, and actually when he became a caregiver for Ziggy, I got to see this process occur, and GR and I have conversations on the phone, and some of these conversations go on 2 hours where we're just going crazy. And at one point, I stopped GR and I said, wait, this is a podcast. We need to have you on. So I think we should start. GR, why don't we start with you just sharing your story? Tell everybody what you've gone through, what you deal with, how you got here.
Oh, wow. Okay. Absolutely. It's interesting, Mike. A lot of people call it the journey. And just recently, my brother, Doc Ziggy, he said, I'm going to stop calling this a journey. He says, this is my adventure. It really does fit him a lot better. So we're sticking with adventure. And it really starts about, I'd say 6 years ago, when my brother was really trying to make a transition back to becoming the person who got to enjoy the freedom that he fought for. He had tricked out a trailer and was going to just drive around the country, visit his battle buddies, take in the sights, and just kind of be a little bit of a nomad, right? And he had called me up one day and said, hey, bro, can I use your house as a jumping off point? And also a place to kind of come back and regroup if I have to. And sure, why not? I got you, no big deal. And as he was, getting ready to go out and go on the road, he started first noticing some issues going on inside of him, being a little bit more forgetful, a little bit more sluggish, things like that. But he wasn't really admitting to them. And apparently that is something that veterans do, is they have these issues and they keep them internal. Right. And from what I understand, it's really just them trying not to be a burden on the people that are around them and that they love. And also, from what I understand now, it's also a little bit scary. It's something new that they have to deal with, and kind of reminding them of their own mortality, and they're not who they once were. So that's where this adventure really starts. And as he's starting to notice these things, he decided to put off going out and stick around the home a little bit longer. And one day he started having some issues where he was having um, some seizures, still not admitting to them. Right. So as he starts having these seizures and they get more and more intense along the way, um, one day he ends up having a large grand mal seizure right here in the house. He was playing video games with my son, and he excused himself, ran into the bathroom, trying to collect himself, and he just has this big seizure that put him down on the ground inside this little half bathroom. He manages to come to, and as he comes to, gets out of the bathroom and he starts to fall. And my son catches him. They go to the ground. As he goes to the ground, he kind of halfway comes back to, and I'm running downstairs to see what the commotion is. And it turns out that the diagnosis from that incident was he was now epileptic. Okay.
Wow.
Now, the reason he was epileptic, if we go back to his service time, is he was fortunate enough to live through 21 IED blasts while he was serving in Iraq. And you know, he was fortunate enough to come back. And that's how he sees it, but the damage was still done. And we're finding out through speaking with his neuro doctor, his neurologist, that this is not just an isolated incident. There is onset epilepsy in so many of the men and women who served 10, 15 years later down the road. You can very much equivocate it to like football players dealing with CTE, right?
Wow.
You have a lot of these issues later down the road. So as he has this issue, he kind of tried to, slough it off, no big deal. But a few days later, he has another seizure. Well, actually, no. Let me strike that. It wasn't a few days later. Man, this is all a blur.
Yeah.
He actually a few days later he gets into the VA system, so we can start figuring out what's going on and managing the epilepsy. And he did, but a little bit more down the road, he has another, what we found out was what we're saying and being told is a peripheral stroke that took the right side of his body. Okay. And
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is that
no,
in
no,
addition to the seizures, or is that the cause of the seizures?
absolutely in addition to the seizures,
okay.
right?
Oh, wow.
So for a year's time, while trying to get the seizures in control, he was having a lot of focal seizures in that time, some of them lasting way too long. Anything more than 5 minutes is something you got to be concerned about. You also don't know what further damage is being done. Well, so he's going through that for a year, trying to get it managed. We finally get it dialed in, but he has this big peripheral stroke that lands him in the hospital. And in the hospital, they're trying to tell him, and this is in a civilian hospital just down the street here. They're trying to tell him it's all in his head. He doesn't have any issues, and they let him go after he was there for a little while, right? So get this. They have a telebabysitter, this camera on a pole that's sitting watching him because they're afraid of, any of his outbursts or what might happen. They have him tied to the bed, but he doesn't have any issues, right?
Wait,
So
what, afraid of his outbursts?
Yeah.
well, yeah.
Yeah,
So
go back to that for a second.
Yeah. What is that?
So while you're dealing with traumatic brain injuries and you're living with post-traumatic stress, you're apparently your brain's not all there. And if you're in a situation that's scaring the bejesus out of you, you'll tend to act out. and you'll try and it's much like dementia patients, I guess I could say. You know, you can become violent, you can have outbursts, you can, you know, your brain's in fight or flight mode.
Now, have you
And
been diagnosed with TBI and PTSD at this point?
he had been diagnosed.
And did
Um,
they not understand what that could cause, or was just their way of dealing with it in the hospital?
I th- I think it's the latter. Their way of dealing with the hospital was treating the immediate symptom, and the immediate what was going on.
No, the way
And
their way of dealing with it was tying him down?
at one point, yeah, he was tied down.
Jeez. So put him on telesitter, tie the
Yeah,
guy
put
in
him on
bed,
telesitter.
right?
Yeah.
He's completely 100% neurologically, with it, and almost say deny that he has PTSD
Right.
and deny that he has a TBI, despite the fact that he's been diagnosed and had
Yeah,
now has
Correct.
that's not gonna have
longstanding
any problems.
right, and has a longstanding history of seizures, and given the fact that he survived 21 IED attacks.
My God.
Wow.
Yes, and there were other issues, going back to the seizure diagnosis. They in the emergency room, and I was explicit about this because his neuro told me to. He's like, make sure they do not overdose him on his seizure meds. One, we were still working on dialing him in perfectly.
Right.
And so he said he cannot have more than this dose. If they want to, make sure you call me. I had his after hours number. I gave him the after hours number. I was adamant, and they still overdosed him on his seizure med. So, you know, there's a lot going on there, and a lot of that
Let me
I
ask you.
think has to do with communication between within the healthcare systems.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask
Right?
you is why? Why do you think that happened?
I think it's one is communication within the healthcare systems. Two is not being taken seriously as his caregiver or his brother, right? And I think a lot of caregivers have that problem. Walking into clinical situations is you're not taken seriously. And the feeling walking into those situations is, look, I know him better than he knows himself at this point.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and I've s- I've seen every little thing, and I am now the one person in the world that knows that I have to be looking for every single pattern and pattern change around him, just and just to keep the peace in the home,
And
right?
and
That's
are you
just
received in that moment or in those moments?
No, you're really not. You
Why
go
not?
into this trying to give this information, and sometimes you have to check yourself, you know, and your emotions as well. That's one thing I have to remember to do as a caregiver, because it's also a scary situation with a loved one.
Yeah.
And but you don't feel received in these moments, especially in an emergency room. I can even give a little bit of slack in an emergency room situation, but the times when you're with a primary caregiver, a primary provider, and that happens, you tend to get a little upset, right?
Of
Because
course.
you know
Yeah.
what's going on with your person, you know, and you know what sets them off, and you know, uh, especially people dealing with post traumatic stress and brain injury, is a word can set him off. Overstimulation, the room being too cold, the room being too warm, there being too much light, all these little things. And they're just trying to have a conversation with him and not realizing why he's agitated, right? Or, and a lot of times, don't get me wrong, it just comes off as him being rude, um, without taking into account all the underlying things that are going on inside of him
And
at the
at
time.
these times, do you as the caregiver try to step in and say, "Hey, let me explain what he's going through right now"?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know,
And
you
is that received? Is that received or is that ignored?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no, depending on the situation. And again, depending on how they're receiving my brother at the time as the patient. And if my emotions get out of control in that moment, that will also matter how something's received, right? So
Right.
this isn't just a doctor, patient, caregiver thing. This is a people situation, I think, that is the important conversation to have, right? It's not about pointing fingers. It's about making sure that we all have a better understanding of what's going on in these moments.
It's a compassion thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
GR,
Well,
that first time when your brother was admitted to the hospital and you did everything you could. You said, "Here's my after hours number. Please don't give him more medication than is required." And then nobody called you. How did you find out that he had received more than all the conversations you had with his care team? How did you find that out?
So how I found that out is I called my brother in the hospital to get an update, see if he wanted me to come by and hang out for a little bit. And he was in of the mind that they gave him more than his dosage. And at that moment I couldn't, all I could do was take his word for it.
Right.
And that prompted me, whether he wanted me to go to the hospital at that point or not, I was going to, because he brought this up and I wanted to investigate myself. Right. So, at, at this point, it's now as an advocate for him, right? I'm going in to investigate and see what were the
right.
dosages, what's going on. And in all honesty, that's another hurdle for a lot of caregivers. If you don't already have, proper documentation, power of attorney,
Mhm.
the correct power of attorney, then you may not necessarily get those answers from a doctor in that moment. So that's another hurdle that a lot of caregivers deal with, is they may walk in expecting to be, having conversations with doctors, and you're not going to get that information. But that's how we found out, as I went in and did a little due diligence.
So
And did you?
that's a HIPAA thing, right?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
totally is. But
So it's funny because I had a friend in the hospital, Joe, and I went to visit him, and the doctor came in, and the doctor simply asked him, "Is it okay to have this conversation in front of your friend?"
Sure.
And all he had to say was yes. And
Yeah.
after that, the doctor just talked away. Um, it should be, in that moment, that simple. It should be simple enough for Ziggy to say, for Doc Ziggy to go, "Hey, this is my brother. You can have the conversation with him on my behalf."
yeah,
Yeah, I agree to a point. And this is where I have no problem taking the healthcare perspective into account. Is while a um verbal approval from the patient, you know, and consent might be legal. If I'm a doctor, I want it documented. I want to make sure that
Yeah,
I'm not putting my
fair enough.
patient, then myself, then my career. I get all that. But to your point, Mike, yes, if I think we can all take a situation, look at the context of it, and if it's just some simple questions go back and forth, sure, that consent could be enough, and no big deal. And then if it gets a little bit deeper, then maybe they want to ask, hey, do we have everything in order here to
Yeah.
be providing this information? So again, a lot of times it just comes back to common sense, and not going to edge extremes just to prove points. And that's on all sides, because I know I've been guilty of doing that too as a caregiver. Again, it's tough, because they're usually emotional times when you're in those moments.
GR,
Now,
oh, Mike, can I ask a quick
go ahead.
question?
Go ahead,
I
Rob.
just
Go
had a
ahead.
thought. So there's a statistic I was looking at it in our notes, and it says approximately one third, 25 to 34% of military veteran caregivers felt the healthcare providers listened to them or sought their input regarding the care recipient's health. GR, dig into that a little more. I knew this is the road you're going down.
Yeah.
Dig into that a little bit more, because I think this is exactly what you're talking about.
Sure. So that's actually, thank you for bringing that up. It's a fantastic little rabbit hole to go down right now, because you walk into these rooms and sometimes you feel like you're being talked over, right? Or talked around. And if you do try and interject, it's almost like okay, yeah, thanks, nice kid, and they're patting on you on the head.
Yeah.
That's the feeling you get, right? Doesn't mean that's necessarily what's going on. It's just how it gets received most of the time. It's no, I know I felt that feeling, and what happens with that all of a sudden is it becomes frustrating, because when you don't feel like you're being heard, and you're just being patronized, then um it really just like, I think some people just shut down.
Yeah.
I think people like me who are like, oh, well, you know what, I'm going to advocate, and I don't care about your feelings now because you just hurt mine. And so when it becomes that tug of war, right, where at that point you just feel like, okay, you're a doctor and you have a God complex. That was my initial response. So now I'm like, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. And am I really helping my brother at that moment? No, I'm just trying to make a point. And that becomes an
Sometimes
issue.
that point does help in the long run, though, doesn't it?
No, absolutely. It absolutely does. And that's kind of what I'm leading into, is that if we are taken seriously as caregivers with good information, good patient data, it doesn't even necessarily need to be right or wrong, right? But it's at least information that the doctor can use as they're doing their jobs, right? You can dismiss the data without dismissing the person, I
Right.
think.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
and so that to me is a huge part of communication. I mean, we all run into it in relationships, right? You have a significant other, you don't feel seen, you don't feel heard, and that leads to problems.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's any different in the doctor's office, or in the lab, or anywhere else for that matter. Humans want to be seen, they want to be heard, and working together is a big deal. Especially when there's some interesting times where, especially dealing with veterans, they will be agitated and uneasy going into a doctor's visit. And so they may have elevated blood pressure,
Yep.
Right.
stress levels before we get there. And then all of a sudden we get to the office and it's not there. And the doctor like, there's no problem. And okay, great. And then once we get back out in the car, and veterans going to let loose of whatever's going on, if they become agitated again, that's going to spike back up.
Yeah.
Now, I think that it's very important that us as caregivers are documenting these things, communicating to the physicians that we are documenting these things, and then sharing that information with them so that they get the full view, right? And they can then help caregivers, right? If we knew the perspective, that if we knew the things that were going through their head as these things were going on, that would be very helpful, right? Because I'm not the professional, I'm just the guy who's connecting the dots.
Right. So,
Right.
so
As I see them.
it's interesting to me, being the guy that's connecting the dots, being the caregiver in the home, being the caregiver that's there basically 24/7, right?
Yeah.
And then to get in the office or into the hospital room or wherever, and not be considered in that manner. How does a caregiver deal with that? Or how can in your experience? How can caregivers that are struggling with that deal with that, get around that? How can they make themselves seen? How can they make themselves heard? How can they make the provider, we'll call the doctor the provider,
Sure.
understand that in this moment, the caregiver knows more about your patient than you do, and you probably need to shut up and listen. How do we
Yeah.
You
do
know
that?
what? That's a
Obviously in
great
a nice
question.
way, but how do we do that?
Yeah. No,
No,
GR,
that's a great
how do
question.
you become visible
Yeah,
in these moments with your brother, in the office, in the hospital, wherever? How do
right.
you become visible?
That's a Again, thank you for that. It's a fantastic question. And I think there's two things that are super important for a caregiver to become visible. And one, that's educating themselves on how these systems work to the best of their ability, right? Asking a lot of questions to get that. And then two, again, documentation, right? If you can come in with documentation that isn't anecdotal, I think you're taken more seriously. A lot of times caregivers will go in and the information they have might be pertinent, but when they present it, it's and they're trying to, if they're reaching for sticky notes that they had
Mhm.
written down and it's all unorganized and out of sorts, I think it's easy to be dismissed. But if you can go in and you have organized documentation that is even in a language that a doctor might understand a little bit more, right? It's a little bit more clinical. So taking the time to learn a few terms is super helpful. I mean, in this day and age, we have the internet. You can look things up, right? And say, and especially with AI, how can I say this to a doctor is very easy now. And doing that homework, and interesting enough, because the one reason I learned that it goes actually back to my corporate days, and it's a little quick side story. But one time Nelson Mandela was asked, "How did you survive all of the prisons that these dangerous prisons that you were in?" And his simple response was, "I learned to speak the language of the guard."
Wow.
Wow.
But
And
what's interesting there is that, and what I'm putting together, tell me if I'm wrong, is that you have this provider who's got years of training. And Rob and I know this. We've got years of training in healthcare. This is what
Very
we
well.
do. So speaking the language becomes very easy to us.
Yes.
Mhm.
But you're talking about, in I would guess most cases, a caregiver who is now being forced to, and I'm using the word forced, maybe it's the wrong word, but being forced to give themselves an education in something that they may not be interested in, but for the patient that they're taking care of, for the vet they're taking care of, they've got to do. And on top of that, they still have family, they still have kids, they still have jobs to go to, they still have all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That
So
and dude,
so my question
honestly,
becomes, how do we as healthcare providers, right? Physicians, nurses, respiratory therapists, everybody, PT, OT, how do we, understanding that, first of all, we need to understand it, but once we understand it, how do we help? How can we be of service to the caregiver in those moments?
the very, very tip of that question is do what you just did. Take a minute to pause, reflect, and get an understanding of what's really going on here, right? Again, two, asking more questions. In any situation, I found that the more I ask questions rather than trying to impose my will,
Mm-hmm.
good
Mhm.
things happen,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Matter of perspective.
And you get a better
Yep.
perspective. You lighten the load of any miscommunications that might be going on, right? And so I think even if the doctor already has the question, if they're as the answer, I'm sorry, if they're asking me more questions to get a better understanding. So I think and I'm the guy who studies and does my homework, right? So
Right.
so I think it was Stephen Covey who said back in the day, it, it's better to understand first before trying to make yourself understood,
100%.
or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but it's that kind of a feeling, right? If you're willing to sit down with me, if a provider's willing to say, "Hey, look, what's going on here?" Again, like you said, how can I help? That question being asked, it's amazing what that will do to a person sitting on the other side who's already nervous, who's already unsure, who is looking for answers and looking for solutions. How can I help is huge, right? Make me feel human.
Right. Yeah.
GR, that speaks a lot. I was thinking about, as you're going through and explaining all this, the word trust kept coming into my head.
100%.
And many times, right, veterans, when we leave the military, right, we trust the people that are around us all the time, especially combat veterans, right? Small
Yes.
integrated units, you rely on the person to your right, rely on the person to your left. When that isn't there anymore, and then you start having medical maladies and you're getting sick and having all these things happen, who do you turn to? Who do veterans trust? So, for
Right.
example, like your brother, Doc, he trusts you. Doc Ziggy trusts you. But as you're telling this story and being dismissed and not listened to, how do you and your brother go into these the ERs and physicians practices and ensure that there is trust between you, your brother, and the healthcare team? Because that has to be a factor.
That's a great segue into this next part of my story. So, way to take us there. As we're going through my brother's adventure, and he has his stroke that takes the right side of his body. He was trying to go through physical therapy, and his decision was that I know I'm not the same man anymore. I know I have some limitations, but in his mind, he was going to walk again to the best of his ability.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And so as he's going through this adventure in the VA trying to get rehab, he did not trust the VA. He also believed that he shouldn't have to come out of pocket to pay for his rehabilitation. So he chose to use community care. And what community care is it is a part of VA care that allows you to use civilian providers, and the VA picks up the tab.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And so he went that route. And as my brother went that route, the VA was still giving us a little bit of static. They were making it hard to get referrals approved. They were what we felt like, and we've come to find out that there are many other patients who ran into the same thing. It felt like the VA at the time was purposefully making it difficult to pull you back into the VA. So think of it like an HMO provider not wanting somebody to go out of network, right? Same type of thing. And so we're going through that ordeal. And as my brother is gaining steam and trying to progress, we got to a point where the VA asked us to come in to be reevaluated. The word they used is he had hit a plateau, so why should they approve any more community care appointments? So we come into the VA and for that evaluation, and during that evaluation, and I was sitting there in the room, the VA doctor looked at him square in the eye and asked him, "Why do you want to walk again when you have such a nice walker?"
Whoa.
How do you trust a provider at that moment?
You don't. You don't. You don't.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
that happens. And this
Wait,
goes
I'm
back
sorry,
to the
hold on.
question.
I'm sorry.
Go-
I
go-
gotta cut.
go
I
ahead.
gotta cut you off.
Yeah, Mike, I know you got something on your mind. Do get it off.
Trying not to
Get it out
cuss.
there.
I'm really trying not to cuss. So Doc Ziggy wanted to walk to the best visibility. He wanted to.
Mhm.
He had a goal,
Mhm.
and the VA said no.
Yeah,
How the hell
essentially, yes.
how the hell do you do that?
Yeah.
That's what we felt, right?
And what
How
is
do
the
you do that?
mindset what is the mindset in the provider, and by provider I mean VA and just in general, or any healthcare provider, could be respiratory, could be nursing, could be physicians, could be anybody, PT. What is the mindset in saying, well, you want to be here, but we're gonna get you here? What makes that okay? And I
I
guess
wish
my
I
question
knew.
is Rob, if you have any ideas, what
Uh,
makes that okay for us to do?
I also want to,
Because this is
because
an
our
us thing.
podcast is about ethics and morals, I actually want to go back to where GR said that they wanted his brother to pay for physical therapy out of pocket. Did I hear that correctly?
No,
Yep.
no, they didn't want him to pay for
Okay.
physical therapy out
Okay.
of pocket. He ultimately made the decision to do it
Okay.
because of a lack of trust.
Okay.
And the issues that he was having within the VA system.
Okay.
He finally said that his goal of being his whole self again was more important than the money, and that he was willing to pay the money to do it himself if he had to, which he shouldn't have to.
No.
The contract between himself as a soldier and the VA was, if you get hurt while in service of this country, we are going to take care of you on the back end, right? And
Right.
that's a whole nother
Yeah.
moral dilemma
Yeah.
that we could jump into. But
Well, my thing is that going back to the, why do you want to walk again when you have such a nice walker? Is that beneficence?
Yeah.
Is that being of the patient's best interest? Is that really us trying to be of benefit? I don't feel like it is. I mean, if I had a patient come in and and they were saying, I'd like to be here, and I was like, no, I'm sorry, dude. Hey, why do you want to do that when your wheelchair is so nice? Stop it.
So
thank you.
it's almost as if we still,
It
right,
makes me angry.
we still don't understand the mindset of our veterans. And I'm just going to use, your brother. I'm going to speak to Doc Ziggy for a second. He wasn't just an infantry medic, GR. Your brother was a member of one of the most elite paratroop forces in the world, right? He was with the 101st Airborne. He was a screaming eagle.
Yes, sir.
Okay, your brother is the warrior code. And all your
100%.
brother wanted was to have the right to moral autonomy, right? Make autonomous decision making. And he wanted a restorative process to have dignity.
Yes.
And quality of life. And I think that's a problem sometimes across not just the VA system. And we're not here to pick on the VA system, but I think ethically across the system, do we always appreciate that people want to maintain a quality of life? They want the right to moral autonomous decision making, and they just want to have dignity. And Mike, that goes back to Mike's word, compassion.
Yeah, and it's you said you don't want to pick on the VA system, and it's not just the VA system.
No, you're right.
We deal with this in all areas of healthcare.
I agree.
We deal with these times where we're just not listening. We're not hearing.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're making the decision in our mind because we are, quote, the smarter, more educated person when it comes to that, rather than finding a way to at least progress. We might not reach their goal, but we can certainly get above our goal. And if we can get somewhere in between, and we can let the patient know, and this is just patients across the board, if we can let the patient know that, I understand you want to get there. We may not get you there, but we're going to do everything we can to get you there.
Yep. And it's okay to have honest discussions. And it's okay to be honest, right? I think it's just okay.
Absolutely.
I can't even imagine that when that provider made that comment about why do you want to walk? You have such a great walker.
I'd be furious.
I can't even imagine the look on your face and your brother's face. If I had been a fly in the wall to have seen how
100%.
your expression would have been to that provider.
Absolutely. His initial react, if at that time he could have jumped off of the table, he
Yeah.
would have.
And if I can make
And
a joke, the fact that you're not in jail means you handled it better than I probably would have.
well, honestly,
My God.
that was his initial reaction. He
Yeah.
wanted to, one, pull the beating heart out of the doctor's chest, the provider's chest, and show it to her. This is what he shared with me afterwards and on the way home. And he also wanted to burn down Loma Linda. That was his initial reaction. He thought better of it on the ride home, right? And that's going back to Rob's question of how do veterans find people that they trust, that they can talk to, that they can communicate with and get things off of their chest. That's where Operation Sick Care was born, out of that moment. And Doc coming to the realization that if they're doing this to me, they're also doing this to my brothers and sisters. And they are going to need somebody who understands them, that they can reach out to in moments of crisis, in whether that be micro or macro, right? And so that's where Operation Sick Care came to be. And it really started out as simply veterans helping veterans, and just peer support, right? Being somebody that knows me, that's been through my experience, that understands the road I've walked down. Like Rob just showed the fact that he understood where Doc Ziggy, where he came from, why he would think and act that way. And so had a very tangible understanding of, yeah, he was a warrior. He is the warrior code. And that's why he has this goal in the first place. And so that's where Operation Sick Care came from. And I think that what happened was, along the way of starting this organization and running into all of these roadblocks within the healthcare system, both private and VA, within all of these other organizations that are trying to help and are siloed and fragmented, came this new mission of us trying to build a better ecosystem of support and better networks, right? Because if we're going down this one path, and having the peer support, well, so as we're sitting in peer support, we can uncover that somebody needs clinical help, and that's above my pay grade, right? And so we need a network that we know and trust. We need clinical providers that we know and trust, that we can, put
Right.
align our core values with and give a warm handoff to, right? And if somebody needs work, right, another provider's not just going to throw a link at them, throw a brochure at them and leave them to their own devices. We're finding out that doesn't work. So going back to Rob's question, where do we find people that these warriors can trust? There's a lot of them out there, and right now we're just trying to wrap our arms around the ones that align with us, in the way we move and we think, to give warriors and their families that opportunity to have quality of life, right? To advocate for that quality of life within the hospital walls, within the lab walls, and all of that thing. So it's a work in progress, Rob. We're not the only ones doing it. So if anybody out there, especially in the Inland Empire in California, if that's something that strikes a chord with you, hey, reach out to us. Let's start having those conversations, so we can, better provide better outcomes for our warriors, for our warriors' families. Interesting enough, little quick story, little side note. I was talking to a warrior the other day. He's actually going through transition now, right? He is working on retiring. He'll be done in March. And one of the mistakes I made in the beginning was not sitting with my family and setting down some expectations of what might be to come, because I didn't have all the answers yet, right? So one, letting my family know I didn't have all the answers, and we're moving somebody into the home who's not stable, who is going through some things that we don't fully understand yet, and it is going to bring upheaval to the home. I didn't do that, right? And I learned from that way later. But as I was interviewing this Marine who was going through transition, and he was talking about how, the road he's going down, I asked him, how does your wife feel about all this? What does she think?
Great question.
And it actually stopped him in his tracks. He goes, I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for that. I haven't thought to ask her. Right. So some of the things, like, again, that communication, right? That communication is so important, and thinking to ask somebody else who's going to be affected by what's going on. And I dropped that ball as well. And so there's just so much to think about as we unpack, what's right and what's wrong in these situations. And more than anything, it's something that I learned going through this process. Mike talked about a lot of the conversations we have. Well, I don't know if he knows this or not. He may, but those conversations help me as a caregiver stay sane. Being able to reach out to a trusted friend in some moments, right? They help my mental health. They definitely do. And also for caregivers, one thing I want to put out there is reaching out for resources. And for caregivers, there really isn't a whole lot. You guys were gracious enough to recognize that, or astute, I don't know the right word here, but you recognized that there isn't enough conversation around caregiving right now. And me going through trying to figure out, how am I going to navigate this? Because I put my career to the side to help my brother learn to walk again. Everything. So going from 6 figures a year to no figures a year of income is a big hit to the household.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a big game changer. And so I was reaching out to looking for a resource. I didn't know I was a caregiver. To me, I was just his brother. I was my brother's keeper, doing what was necessary. I stumbled across the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, and they helped tremendously, first helping me recognize that there is a community out there for people like me, for people that are learning how to navigate a healthcare system and the insurance system around that, right? Because one doesn't come without the other. Learning how to deal with a loved one who's going through a hard time. I screwed that up too. When I first took on these caregiving duties, I was helping my brother instead of supporting my brother. I was like a doting mom. I got to make him comfortable. I got to take care of everything for him. He looked at me one day, things blew up. He couldn't take it anymore. And I credit him for finally doing this. He goes, I don't need your effing help. I just need to walk again.
Wow.
Then the light bulb finally went on for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not here to be his mom. I'm not here to dote around him. He just needs me to champion him to be able to walk again. It's up to me to move the obstacles out of his way so that he can walk again. If I can do that, that's my role. That's all he needed.
Wow.
Going back to dignity, right?
Yes. Yep.
He doesn't want for me to, he doesn't want to feel like I'm his burden
Let me
or
share this
he's my
because we're
burden.
talking about it really quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. I just wanted to throw this up. I didn't want to confuse.
Yeah.
GR, I just
He
want to,
doesn't want to. Yeah. Go
I
ahead.
want to compliment, I just want to, I want to talk about Operation Sick Care for a second. What a beautiful mission. I
Thank
mean,
you.
100%. The
Oh,
Elizabeth
yeah.
Dole Foundation, right? You happen, they reached out, you guys connected, just absolutely amazing. You hit on some incredible components that you just wanted to take care of your brother. And it's not malicious, right? That you weren't inclusive of your family in the moment. You're like, this is my brother. He served. I
Right.
gotta take care of him. This is my familial obligation to my
Yes.
brother. And veterans, warriors, we don't want the doting mother, right? To your brother, I give your brother a lot of credit because he finally, had to look you in the eye and be like, dude, I don't want you to be my mother. I want you to help me maintain my dignity.
Yes.
And wow, like just amazing, just an unbelievable,
Yeah.
amazing story. At this point, Operation Sick Care, how broad is your organization? Like, how many veterans are you currently helping?
So right now we are currently helping, I'd say, a handful of his battle buddies who I don't have all of those numbers because he still keeps a lot of his battle buddies close to the
Close to
chest.
the chest. Yeah.
I know, but a number I can give, and we take great pride in this because the one thing that we say every day when we get up is um just one more. That's the mentality that we go through, is just one more. And I know for a fact that there is one, two, three lives that, because of the connection with Operation Sick Care, are still here today.
Wow.
Wow.
Yep. And
3 lives
yep.
that are still here today. Now we've been to countless, resource fairs and have people talking with us, calling in for different things all of the time. So as far as how expansive we are a small fry. We are new at this. We have been doing it for really three years. Like, actually, we hit the ground, and for 3 years we've actually had traction. Um, so we are a small fry. Now we are now starting to connect with other organizations, and working with them to help broaden that scope. But that's where we are right now.
And let me just say, I've thrown a QR code up on the top right of your screen. If you guys would like to connect with GR, I don't know if that's the right or if this is the right. I have no idea. If you guys would like to connect with GR and Operation Sick Care, click the QR code. I will also have it. We'll also make sure that it's in the credits to the show. Credits. I don't know if they're called credits, but that ending part. And in the show notes so that you guys can connect with GR. If you know a caregiver, a vet, or you are a caregiver, or you are a vet, and any of this has touched you and you just need some advice, Operation Sick Care, GR, is who you need to contact. They can get you on the right track. They can get you the help you need. They can get you the resources that you need to help you along this adventure, because it is an adventure for everybody. And it's a different adventure, I'm guessing, for everybody, right, GR?
It is very much a different adventure, and that my eyes were open to that while connecting with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation and learning that there are 14.3 million people like me out there. While we all might have similar situations or diagnoses with our veterans, everybody has a unique story. Everybody has a unique way of handling it. I was lucky enough to be chosen as a 2025 Elizabeth Dole Caregiver Fellow, in which they brought us together last May, this 2025 class out in Washington, D.C. And I got to meet some of these people who just have amazing stories, who are going through the same thing, and we're able to laugh, we're able to cry. I now have a tribe in that caregiving
Right.
space, right?
Excellent.
And to know that is huge, because when you're going through it, you feel like you're on an island. And which is another big reason why I think that, you know, to have healthcare providers and professionals see you and understand you and want to champion that adventure means so much, because it lightens the load. It really does, and believe me, it's a load. Um, so that's huge. But when I found out that I had this other tribe and that we were able to, you know, go to Capitol Hill and share our stories with leadership of this nation, that was also huge. And so, you know, and then to be able to find programs and services that the foundation had to help us as caregivers on the journey, it really was a game changer for me. One, to know there are people on my side, there are people I can go to when I need it, aside from family and friends, because they don't necessarily know all of what I'm going through, and this group of people does. Um, but then just the resources, right? Like, um, financial resources, mental health resources, they're there. And that makes all of the difference in the world. It was the resource that I didn't know I needed.
Right.
Um, and so if anybody out there, you know, is a family caregiver, yes, you can definitely reach out to me, but you can bypass me and go straight to the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. Go to their website, poke around. If you still have questions, you can absolutely contact me. You know, sometimes I find it's nice to have somebody I can just go over the things that I found. So absolutely, you use both of us as resources to help you get through what you need, because it's important. Um, I know I couldn't be where I'm at, you know, on this road without them.
That's an amazing story, dude. Um, and I'm sorry, my voice is a little scratchy. You got me a little emotional earlier. You jerk. Um,
I hate myself.
yeah, I hate you too. I hate you too right now. But I thank you so much for coming on and sharing this story. It is an emotional roller coaster, and it is an ethical issue that we need to attack. You know, we might not be able to tackle it right away. You know, might not be able to solve the problem, but recognizing that the problem exists is the first step. And
Yeah.
it's not just the VA, it's in all of healthcare. And it's not just vets. That's the interesting thing to me, is this isn't just vets. This
Right.
has to do with every single patient that we come in contact with, how we hear them, how we give them their dignity, how we champion them, not just vets, but every single patient. And again, it goes back to compassion, approaching that bedside, approaching that person, that human being with compassion is how we start that process. And we
Yes.
need to start the process, and we need to take it, we need to take step after step after step. Um, and we may never get there, but the goal is to get there someday, somehow.
Someday.
Be better
Someday.
tomorrow than we were today.
That's
Right?
right. I think a good lesson today too for all of our fellow healthcare professionals is don't just listen to speak. You need to listen to hear.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Absolutely.
makes a lot of sense to me, because it does become helpful. And then once you hear, also understand that the patient is more than their diagnosis, right? Especially when they're working in the home to reach their goals. I mean, sometimes the goal is just to have, and this really does lean more on the veteran side of things, to come out of isolation and become part of the family again,
Right.
right?
Absolutely. Amen.
To be able to interact as not only a brother but an uncle, because we do go through those challenges in the home. Again, that goes back to restoring dignity, and championing, a person to be their whole self again. Um, it, it makes all the difference in the world. And quite frankly, I'll tell you what, my brother is walking again.
That's wow.
Yep.
He is walking again.
Wow.
Cane assisted 90% of the time. In the home, he can go without his cane. Outside of the home, he still needs it, but he is walking. He is coming back. I'll tell you what, he was
Got a lot further than that doctor at Loma Linda said he would, huh?
Exactly. They said he'd never go there.
No offense, Loma
And
Linda, but
and he was at 98
Hall has to be better.
pounds. 98 pounds when he went through this. He
Wow.
before his issues, I think he was at 170 pounds. At the bottom, he was a 98-pound skeleton of himself, and he has worked his way back up. I think his last weigh-in was about 151 pounds.
Nice.
And filled out. And so when you want to talk about, listening and hearing, which he found in his physical therapist listened, his physical therapist heard, and through his will to walk again and her willingness to listen and hear and get him there and champion him along me, he is walking.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
And do you want to give her a shout out? Because props to her, man.
Absolutely. So we refer to her as Doc Susan, and I honestly, she does work at a practice. I don't remember the name of it, and the reason I don't is because she did move practices, but she took on Doc as a private patient. He pays her out of his own pocket, took him on as a private patient. So I think that just speaks to, we do need to start listening and championing, because when someone does, and when someone takes the time to listen to the goals and map out a road for them to walk down, great things happen.
Yep. Props to you, Doc Susan. Well done.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Huge, big time.
Yeah, we can't thank her enough. She it is just, she's an amazing doctor with a big heart, and knew the right thing to do.
That's awesome. We all could take a lesson from that in healthcare.
Amen.
100%. And we should. And we're not gonna go from mistakes to perfect. We're gonna make mistakes, but we need to champion our patients. We need to work harder. We need to do better at that, as healthcare in general, and myself included. I make mistakes. We need to do better.
Amen to that.
Well, I've been too emotional the last 15 minutes, I think, and I blame you, GR.
Sorry, I'm holding it in myself, so
yeah,
I'm getting a little bit better at
my
this.
eye off. I'm like, dude, come on. I think you covered it, but I'll ask you anyway if there are any last thoughts that you have, GR, before we close out.
You know what? I think we did cover it all, but my last thought is thank you for opening up this conversation. I think that as healthcare professionals, the thing I was asking for was to be heard, and you provided a platform for that. So I am absolutely grateful to you and Rob for taking the time out of your day to not only listen and hear, but put it out there on the interwebs for other people to listen and hear, because it is that important. And I think that with what you guys are doing, perhaps more and more healthcare professionals could follow suit and take that pause. And if they also have platforms, would be willing to have these types of conversations and keep it going, because the only way that we are going to move the needle even a little bit is to start here. And I think going back to what you said, Mike, is just, moving forward imperfectly so that we can realize the goals and the dreams and that better quality of life that we're all working towards.
Well, it is our absolute pleasure, I'll tell you that, to have you share your story, and we will do everything that we can to help move this story forward, and share it as broadly as possible. So again, GR, thank you so much for coming on. It has been our absolute pleasure, and I know it's personal for me because GR, I've known him and Ziggy for 31 years. They're family to me. These are my brothers, and so it is personal to me. So thank you so much. And to everybody who's made it this far, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll close out with that, and we'll just tell you, we'll see you next time
On Let's Get Ethical.